The international system, the law of the strongest. The social division of labor enhanced the material well-being of humanity. However, it also created conflict and inequality. It robbed all the individual participants of their natural liberty. This signaled a fatal turn of the events in human history. As humanity evolved, social interdependence was exacerbated by private property, which released an unstable quest in humankind for selfish economic advantage. Those who have nothing have limited desires. Those who do not rule have limited ambitions, Rousseau writes. However, as society evolves, it imposes upon humanity both property and responsibilities. Material possessions have their own needs, the satisfaction of which stimulates the quest for more possessions and awakens the vanity and cupidity of humankind. The more one has, the more one wants. Whoever has the most wants everything, Rousseau writes. Ever since the advent of private property, all human qualities have been tainted with a possessive element, infusing strength with a tinge of vanity, skill with competitiveness, love with jealousy. This development has robbed people of their ability to distinguish between good and evil, between real and apparent interests. History testifies to how the advance of property exacerbated the inequalities which nature had placed in humankind, rendering them more clearly seen and more deeply felt. It shows the gap between the haves and the have-not has widened. In the midst of growing misery and strife and further weakening of the weak, humanity has striven to develop social hierarchies and social orders. Finally, humanity developed political institutions backed by law. These institutions consolidated the principle of private property, sanctioned social inequality, protected the wealth and power of the ruling elite, oppressed the poor majority of mankind, and alienated them in the process. The foundation of the Commonwealth marks the final stage of this long historical process. The Commonwealth imposes upon the growing anarchy among individuals. However, the same act which solves the problem of anarchy among individuals creates a condition of anarchy among states. In Rousseau's mind, humanity has left one stage of nature, characterized by liberty and peace, and enters another stage of nature, marked by oppression and war. It is not difficult to see that each of us is in the civil state with regards to our fellow citizens, but in a state of nature as regards to the rest of the world. That we have taken all kinds of precautions against private wars only to kindle national wars which are 1,000 times more terrible. That in joining a particular group of men, we have in reality become the enemy of mankind. Out of this depiction of rulers' greed and citizens' misery and everyone's alienation, Rousseau formulates a vision whose nightmarish qualities rival even those of Hobbes' state of nature. The rulers are greedy and animated solely by two desires: to extend their territorial power and to achieve a more absolute rule over their subjects. The citizens are alienated and enthusiastically contributed money and men to support wars of conquest and the subjugation of conquered peoples. And they do not realize that they thereby deepen their own misery. Rulers' greed and citizens' alienation feed on another. Anyone can understand that war and conquest without the encroachment of despotism within each other's give each other's mutual support. That money and men are habitually taken at the pleasure from a people of slaves, to bring others beneath the same yoke, and that conversely, war furnishes a pretext for extractions of money and another, for keeping large armies constantly on foot, to hold people in awe. In a word, anyone could see that aggressive princes wage war at least as much on their subjects as on their enemies, and that the conquering nation is left no better off than the conquered. Rousseau depicts domestic society in gloomy terms, but his vision of international society is far bleaker. For whereas civil society at least is regulated by law, apart from the ruling elite of course, the society of states in effect obeys no law, but the law of the strongest. In his description of this law, Rousseau is true to the sentiment of his age. He describes it in explicit, a balance of power terms, and he does this with a sophistication and a concreteness which was scarcely superseded by the 18th century's authors. In his A Project for a Perpetual Peace, Rousseau introduced a discussion of the European balance of power by a description of Europe's cultural geography. The powers of Europe constitute a kind of system, united by the same religion, international law, and moral standards, by letters, by commerce, and by a kind of equilibrium, which is the inevitable outcome of all these ties. This equilibrium in Rousseau's mind This equilibrium is in Rousseau's mind more a product of nature than the work of humankind. The lie of the mountains, seas, and rivers, which serve the frontiers of various nations who inhabit it, seems to have fixed forever their number and their size. This equilibrium brings a semblance of order to the relations between European states, Rousseau explains. And although the rulers of individual states act to extend their dominions, the balance still obtains. It is there, and men who do not feel themselves strong enough to break it conceal the selfishness of their designs under the pretext of preserving it. Rousseau articulates the sentiment of the age when he depicts the European balance of power as self-equilibrating. Whether we are aware of it or not, the equilibrium continues to support itself without the aid of any special intervention. If it breaks for a moment on one side, it soon restores itself on another, so that if princes who are accused of aspiring to universal monarchy were in reality guilty of any such venture, they displayed more evidence of ambition than of genius. How could any man look such a project in the face without instantly perceiving its absurdity, without realizing that there is not a single potentate in Europe so much stronger than the others has ever to have a chance of making himself their master? This self-sustaining balance prevents one state from attaining mastery over all Europe. For whenever a ruler seeks to extend his country's territory by military means, other rulers will unite against him at every step. Every once in a while, a ruler may be lucky and conquer an uncommonly large territory. However, Rousseau writes, even such lucky bastards are bound to fail over the longer haul. The resistance in the long run as strong as the attack. The resistance is in the long run as strong as the attack, and time soon repairs the sudden accidents of fortune. if not for each prince individually, at least for the general balance of power as a whole. This self-regulated balance of power imposes a principle of order on the interaction between states. But it does not bring peace. Although the European balance of power blocks major conquests over the long haul, in day-to-day politics it merely perpetuates instability and irritation. Indeed, Europe is plagued by perpetual conflict, quarrels, robberies, usurpations, revolts and wars, which bring daily desolation to this venerable home of philosophy, this brilliant sanctuary of arts and science. The integration of the states of Europe has made the continent wealthier than other regions of the world, and forged a historic fellowship far closer than is found elsewhere. However, since their cruel conflicts occur not in spite of interdependence, but because of it, tighter integrations only renders these plagues and conflicts more frequent, more intense, and more deadly, explains Rousseau. The historic union of the nations of Europe has entangled their rights and interests in thousand complications. They touch each other at so many points that the smallest movement of one of them gives a jolt to all of the rest. Their differences are all the more deadly, as their ties are more intimately woven. Their frequent quarrels are almost as savage as civil wars. Let us admit, then, that the powers of Europe stand in each other strictly in a state of war, and that all the separate treaties between them are in the nature, rather, of a temporary truce than a real peace.